Instinct took over. Survival instinct honed by months of unwanted touches, of boundary violations dismissed as part of the job. She spun, her tray raised high, and brought it crashing down onto the man's head with a metallic clang that cut through the music like a gunshot. The club smelled like stale cigarette smoke and cheap perfume, a haze of neon pink and electric blue cutting through the dim interior like a half-hearted promise. Amelia Jonas moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, her tray balanced on one hand, her expression carefully neutral. The vinyl of her black skirt stuck to her thighs in the oppressive heat, and the bass from the speakers rattled in her chest like a second heartbeat. She'd learned early on not to make eye contact. Not with the men who lingered too long at the bar, not with the women who danced on tables for tips, not with anyone who might mistake her attention for invitation. This club was called the Velvet Cage, and though it wasn't the worst in the city, it wasn't far from it. The floors were perpetually sticky with spilled drinks, the bathrooms reeked of vomit and desperation, and the manager turned a blind eye to anything that didn't directly affect his bottom line. Still, it paid. Barely. Just enough to keep the lights on at home, to keep her mother's medications stocked, to keep her younger brother in school. Amelia threaded through a cluster of drunk businessmen, their laughter too loud, their hands too free. She sidestepped a groping palm with the ease of repetition, delivered their drinks without a word, and collected the crumpled bills they tossed onto her tray like she was a performing animal. Her jaw ached from clenching. "Hey, sweetheart, how about a smile?" one of them called after her. She didn't respond. Didn't turn around. Just kept walking. Behind the bar, Mina was pouring shots with mechanical precision, her bleached blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She caught Amelia's eye and mouthed, 2 more hours. Amelia nodded, allowing herself a brief moment of solidarity before diving back into the fray. The night dragged on with the relentless monotony of survival. Drunk patrons stumbled, spilled drinks, made crude jokes, and occasionally fought each other while security hauled them out the back door. Amelia had seen it all before. She'd seen worse. What she hadn't seen was the man who entered just after midnight. He didn't belong here. That much was obvious from the moment he stepped through the entrance, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who scanned the room with cold, professional efficiency. The first man, the one in the center, moved like he owned the ground beneath his feet. His charcoal suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection, and his black hair was swept back to reveal a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes so dark they seemed to swallow light. The room didn't go silent. The Velvet Cage wasn't that kind of place. But Amelia noticed the subtle shifts, the way people averted their gazes, the way conversations became just a little quieter, the way even the most belligerent drunks suddenly found reasons to mind their own business. She didn't know who he was, but she knew power when she saw it. The man and his entourage made their way toward the VIP section at the back of the club, the area reserved for clients who could afford bottle service and privacy. Amelia watched them go, then turned back to her work. Whoever he wasn't her problem. She was wrong. 20 minutes later, as she was weaving through the crowd with a fresh round of drinks, someone brushed past her from behind. Not a casual bump. Deliberate. A hand, large, warm, intrusive, grazed her lower back, then dipped lower, fingers spreading across the curve of her hip with unmistakable intent. Amelia didn't think. Instinct took over. Survival instinct honed by months of unwanted touches, of boundary violations dismissed as part of the job. She spun, her tray raised high, and brought it crashing down onto the man's head with a metallic clang that cut through the music like a gunshot. Drinks flew. Ice scattered across the floor. Glass shattered. The club seemed to pause. Conversations stuttered. Even the dancers faltered mid-spin, their attention drawn to the commotion. The man didn't move. Didn't stumble. Didn't even blink. He stood there, tall and immaculate in his charcoal suit, and Amelia's heart stopped as she recognized him. The man from earlier. The one who didn't belong. Oh God. He lifted his head slowly, and his eyes, dark, cold, and utterly devoid of warmth, fixed on her with the focus of a predator spotting prey. There was no rage in his expression. No shock. Just an eerie, calculating stillness that was somehow more terrifying than anger. Around them, the club had gone deathly quiet. Even the music seemed to fade into background noise. When he spoke, his voice was low, smooth, and edged with something lethal. "How dare you?" The words hung in the air like a blade suspended above her throat. Amelia's fingers tightened around the tray, her knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to grovel, to beg forgiveness. But something deeper, something stubborn and reckless, refused to bow. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze head-on. "How dare you touch me?" For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those dark eyes. Amusement? Curiosity? Rage? It was impossible to tell. "I didn't," he said flatly, his tone brooking no argument. "Then who did?" He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced past her, just once, and the crowd seemed to melt away from a shorter man in a rumpled blazer who'd gone pale as a corpse. The man stammered something incoherent, his eyes wide with terror, then fled toward the exit like the devil himself was at his heels. Amelia's breath caught. She'd hit the wrong person. The realization settled over her like ice water. She'd assaulted a stranger, clearly someone important, because she'd assumed he was the one groping her. And now she was standing here, holding an empty tray, surrounded by broken glass and the weight of dozens of stares. The man in the suit turned his attention back to her, and the weight of it was suffocating. He stepped closer, not threatening, exactly, but deliberate, and she could smell the faint trace of expensive cologne, something dark and woody that didn't belong in a place like this. "You should be more careful," he murmured, his tone deceptively soft. "Violence without precision is just chaos." Amelia's pulse hammered in her ears, but she refused to step back. Refused to show weakness. And precision without cause is just cruelty. The words left her mouth before she could stop them, sharp and defiant. For a moment, the man simply stared at her. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. More like the ghost of one, as if he'd just discovered something unexpectedly interesting. He leaned in, just slightly, and his voice dropped to a whisper that only she could hear. "What's your name?" "Why?" "Because I don't forget faces." His gaze swept over her, cataloguing every detail. "Or debts." Amelia swallowed hard, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "Amelia Jonas. And I don't owe you anything." His eyes lingered on hers for a moment longer, as if committing every detail to memory, the defiance in her expression, the set of her jaw, the way she refused to flinch even when every rational part of her screamed to run. Then he straightened, adjusted the cuff of his sleeve with meticulous care, and turned away without another word. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, and he disappeared into the shadows at the back of the club, his bodyguards falling into step behind him. Only then did Amelia realize she'd been holding her breath. The club slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed. The music swelled. But Amelia stood frozen, her hands trembling, the empty tray slipping from her fingers to clatter on the floor. "Jesus Christ, girl," hissed Mina, appearing at her side and grabbing her arm with bruising force. "Do you have any idea who that was?" Amelia shook her head, still staring at the empty space where he'd been. Mina's eyes were wide with terror, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "That was Seung Do Hwa. He owns half the city. The other half is too scared to admit he owns them too. He runs the Korean syndicates, controls the ports, the gambling, the protection rackets, everything." Amelia's stomach dropped like a stone. "And you just hit him with a fucking tray." The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Amelia moved on autopilot, serving drinks, collecting money, dodging hands, and questions. Her mind kept replaying the encounter, the cold intensity of Seung Do Hwa's gaze, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve, the ghost of that almost smile. "I don't forget faces. Or debts." By the time her shift ended at 3 in the morning, exhaustion had settled into her bones like lead. She changed out of her work clothes in the cramped employee bathroom, pulling on worn jeans and a faded sweater, and stepped out into the cool night air. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Amelia watched the city slide past the grimy windows, towering skyscrapers giving way to run-down apartment blocks, neon lights fading into dim street lamps. This was the other side of the city, the side that didn't make it into tourist brochures. where poverty and desperation lived side by side, where people worked 3 jobs just to stay afloat. The apartment was dark when she got home, save for the flicker of the television in the living room. Her mother was asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin, her breathing shallow and labored. The oxygen tank beside her hissed softly, a rhythmic reminder of how fragile life had become. Amelia set her purse down quietly and moved to the kitchen, where dirty dishes filled the sink and a stack of bills sat on the counter like a ticking time bomb. She rifled through them mechanically: electricity, water, rent, hospital fees, and felt the familiar weight settle onto her shoulders. $32,000. That's what they owed. Between her mother's treatments for chronic respiratory disease and her younger brother's tuition at the technical school he'd worked so hard to get into, the debt had ballooned beyond anything her waitressing job could touch. She'd tried everything: extra shifts, side gigs, selling homemade jewelry online, even pawning what little they had of value. But it was like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Amelia rubbed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. She should sleep. She had to be at the club again tomorrow night. But sleep felt impossible with the weight of everything pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed on the counter, startling her. A text from an unknown number. "You made an impression." Amelia stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. The message was simple, innocuous even. How did he even get her number? Something about it felt wrong. Invasive. She deleted it without replying and set her phone face down on the counter. But sleep didn't come easy that night. She lay awake in the small bedroom she shared with her brother, him snoring softly on the bottom bunk while she stared at the ceiling and replayed the night's events over and over. The feel of the tray connecting with Seung Do Hwa's head. His cold, penetrating gaze. The way he'd whispered her name like a promise. Or a threat. 3 days passed. Amelia worked her shifts at the Velvet Cage, avoided lingering looks from patrons, and tried to forget the cold intensity of Seung Do Hwa's gaze. But the city had a way of remembering what she wanted to forget. On the 4th day, a man in a black suit appeared at the club during her afternoon shift. He was young, maybe early 30s, with sharp features and an expression of professional courtesy that didn't reach his eyes. He approached her directly, cutting through the handful of day drinkers nursing their hangovers at the bar. "Amelia Jonas." She tensed. "Who's asking?" "I have something for you." He handed her a sealed envelope, cream-colored, expensive paper, her name written in elegant calligraphy on the front. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Amelia stood frozen, the envelope heavy in her hands. Around her, the club carried on as usual, but she felt like she was standing in the eye of a storm. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, embossed with black lettering that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. "Your family's debt has been paid in full. You now work for me. Report to the Eclipse tomorrow at 8 p.m. Don't be late." Below it, a sleek black address in the wealthiest district of the city. A place Amelia had only ever seen from bus windows, never imagined entering. And at the bottom, in sharp, precise handwriting, SDH. The card slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the sticky bar floor. He'd bought her. No, he'd bought her loyalty. Her time. Her choices. Her freedom. Amelia's hands clenched into fists, rage and helplessness warring in her chest. She wanted to crumple the card, to throw it away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But the truth was inescapable, brutal in its simplicity. He'd paid off her family's debt. $30,200, gone with the stroke of a pen. Her mother could get her treatments. Her brother could finish school. They'd have breathing room for the first time in years. And all it cost was her. She picked up the card with shaking hands and read it again. Then again. Mina appeared at her side, concern etched on her face. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have to go," Amelia said quietly. "What?" "Your shift isn't over for another 3 hours." "I have to go," she repeated, her voice hollow. She grabbed her purse, ignored the manager's shouted protests, and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. The city buzzed around her, cars honking, people laughing, life carrying on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. That night, Amelia sat at the small kitchen table with her mother and brother, the card placed between them like evidence at a trial. "You can't do this," her brother Daniel said, his voice cracking. He was 17, all gangly limbs and righteous anger. "You can't just sell yourself to some criminal." "Watch your mouth," their mother said weakly from her wheelchair, but there was no real heat in her words. She looked at Amelia with eyes full of pain and understanding. "Baby, if you don't want to do this. The debt is already paid, Mama," Amelia interrupted gently. "He's already done it. If I don't show up." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Men like Seung Do Hwa didn't make offers. They made arrangements. Her mother reached out and took her hand, her grip weak but warm. "Then you be smart. You stay alert. And you come home to us." Amelia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. That night, she lay awake again, watching shadows play across the ceiling. Tomorrow, her life would change. Tomorrow, she'd step into a world she didn't understand, a world of power and danger and calculated cruelty. Tomorrow, she'd see Seung Do Hwa again. And somehow, that thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The eclipse rose from the city's wealthiest district like a monument to excess and power. Unlike the Velvet Cage's garish neon, this building was all sleek black glass and subtle gold accents, its entrance marked only by a discreet plaque and a line of luxury cars waiting for valet service. Amelia stood across the street, her reflection staring back at her from a darkened shop window, a girl in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit, clutching a purse with broken clasps, trying to look like she belonged in a world that would eat her alive. She'd told herself all day that she wouldn't come. That she'd find another way, any other way. But the truth sat heavy in her chest, there was no other way. The debt was paid. Her family was safe. And now she owed Seung Do Hwa something far more valuable than money. She owed him herself. Amelia crossed the street at exactly 7:58 p.m., her heels clicking against the pavement with a confidence she didn't feel. The doorman, a mountain of a man in an impeccable suit, opened the door without a word, as if he'd been expecting her. Inside, the world transformed. Where the Velvet Cage had been desperate and garish, the eclipse was calculated elegance. Black marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen starlight. Booths lined the walls in deep burgundy, each one occupied by men and women who wore wealth like armor, designer suits, glittering jewelry, the kind of casual luxury that came from never having to check a price tag. The air smelled like aged whiskey and imported cigars, and the music was low, sultry jazz that moved through the space like silk over skin. Amelia stood at the entrance, her second-hand dress suddenly feeling like tissue paper, every eye in the room seeming to assess and dismiss her in a single glance. A woman approached from the shadows, tall, impossibly elegant, with razor-sharp cheekbones and sleek black hair pulled into a severe bun. Her dress was red, fitted, expensive. Her eyes swept over Amelia with the cold precision of a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. "You're the new girl." It wasn't a question. "I'm Amelia. I'm Hannah. I manage the floor." Her gaze continued its clinical assessment. "You'll answer to me. Follow instructions without question. Learn quickly or leave quickly. Understood?" Amelia nodded, her jaw tight. "You'll need new clothes. New makeup. New everything." Hannah circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "This isn't a dive bar where drunk men grope the help. Our clients are powerful, discerning, and dangerous. They expect perfection. Grace. Discretion above all else. And what do they pay for it?" Amelia asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Hannah's smile was razor thin. "More than you've ever seen. But cross the wrong person here, and you'll wish you were back serving drunks in the gutter. The eclipse has rules. Break them, and even Mr. Seung won't protect you." Before Amelia could respond, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Conversations didn't stop, exactly, but they became more careful. Movements more precise. As if everyone was suddenly aware of being watched. Seung Do Hwa descended the curved staircase at the back of the room with the unhurried grace of a man who'd never had to rush for anything in his life. His suit tonight was midnight blue, so dark it was almost black, tailored to perfection. His hair was styled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, And his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, found hers immediately. He moved through the room, and people parted for him without thought, without hesitation. Some nodded respectfully. Others averted their gazes. All of them understood what Amelia was only beginning to grasp. This was his kingdom, and they were merely guests in it. "Amelia," he said, stopping in front of her. His voice was smooth, controlled. "You came. Did I have a choice?" Something flickered in his expression, amusement, perhaps. "There's always a choice. You made yours." She met his gaze, refusing to look away even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "You bought my family's debt. That's not a choice. That's coercion. I prefer to think of it as an investment." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You could have run. Disappeared. Changed your name. The city is large enough to hide in. And my family would have remained debt-free. I keep my promises, Miss Jonas. Whether you honor yours is a separate matter." Amelia's hands clenched at her sides. He was right, and they both knew it. He'd given her a way out, a dishonorable one, but a way out nonetheless. And she'd come anyway, because running meant leaving her family vulnerable, meant living in constant fear of retribution. "So why am I here?" she asked quietly. Seung stepped closer, close enough that she could smell that dark, woody cologne again. "Because you're not afraid of me. And that makes you either very brave or very foolish. I intend to find out which." His gaze held hers for a long moment, and Amelia felt something electric pass between them, not attraction, exactly, but recognition. Two people who refused to bend, suddenly forced into proximity. He turned to Hannah, breaking the spell. "Show her everything. I want her ready by the end of the week." "Yes, sir." Seung walked away without another glance, disappearing through a door marked private. The room seemed to exhale collectively, tension easing. Hannah's voice cut through Amelia's thoughts. "Word of advice, girl. Don't fall for him. Men like that don't love. They consume. Use. Discard. You're a novelty now. The girl who hit him with a tray and lived to tell about it. But novelties fade." Amelia forced herself to breathe, to center. "I'm not here to fall for anyone. I'm here to survive." Hannah's expression softened, just slightly, revealing something almost like respect. "Good. Then you might actually make it. Come. We have a lot of work to do." The first week was a baptism by fire. Amelia learned that the Eclipse wasn't just a club, it was a nexus of power. Politicians conducted backroom deals in the private rooms. Corporate executives celebrated mergers over $1,000 bottles of champagne. And underneath it all, like a dark current, ran the real business. The laundering, the negotiations, the careful balance of favors and threats that kept the city's underworld functioning. Hannah taught her how to move through this world like a ghost, present but not intrusive, attentive but not invasive. How to pour a perfect pour of Macallan 25, how to read a client's mood in the set of their shoulders, how to deflect unwanted attention with a polite smile and strategic positioning. "Never let them corner you," Hannah instructed during a rare quiet moment. "Always keep an exit route. Always keep your back to a wall if possible. And if someone gets aggressive, you find me or security immediately. Mr. Seung doesn't tolerate violence against his staff." "Why?" Amelia asked. "Not out of kindness, I'm guessing." Hannah's smile was grim. "Because we're his investment. Damaged goods lose value. Plus, it sets a precedent. If he lets clients abuse the help, what's to stop them from testing other boundaries?" It was a cynical logic, but Amelia understood it. Everything here was transactional. Calculated. She also learned that Seung Do Hwa was always watching. Not overtly. He never hovered or micromanaged. But she'd catch glimpses of him in the shadows, sitting in a private booth conducting quiet conversations, standing at the upstairs balcony overlooking the floor, his gaze tracking movements with the precision of a chess master planning moves ahead. And more often than not, when she looked up, she'd find his eyes on her. It was unnerving. Infuriating. And, disturbingly, it made her pulse quicken in ways she refused to examine. On her fifth night, reality came crashing in. Amelia was serving drinks to a group of businessmen in one of the mid-tier booths, not wealthy enough for the private rooms, but affluent enough to afford the Eclipse's prices. They were loud, boisterous, riding the high of some successful deal. She set down their drinks with practiced efficiency, already turning to leave when one of them grabbed her wrist. Wait, sweetheart. Come sit with us for a minute. She recognized the type immediately. Mid-40s, wedding ring conspicuously absent despite the tan line on his finger, the kind of man who confused money with permission. I'm working, sir, she said evenly, trying to pull her hand free. His grip tightened, fingers digging into her wrist hard enough to bruise. I said sit. I'm paying good money here. The least you can do is be friendly. Amelia's free hand moved instinctively toward her pocket, where she'd started carrying a pen as a makeshift weapon. But before she could reach it, the man's hand was wrenched away with brutal efficiency, and he was yanked bodily out of his seat. Seung stood there, his hand wrapped around the man's throat, his expression colder than winter. The transformation was instantaneous, from the controlled, elegant club owner to something far more dangerous. The predator beneath the suit. She said no, Seung murmured, his voice lethally soft but carrying throughout the suddenly silent booth. The man wheezed, clawing at Seung's grip, his face reddening. I didn't mean I was just. You were just leaving. Seung released him, and the man collapsed against the booth, gasping. You're banned. Permanently. If you return, you'll leave in pieces. Two security guards appeared as if materializing from shadows, massive men in black suits who looked former military. They hauled the still gasping businessman toward the exit while his companions sat frozen, suddenly very interested in their drinks. Seung turned to Amelia, his expression unreadable, the cold fury already locked away behind his controlled facade. You all right? She nodded, rubbing her wrist where red marks were already forming. Her heart was racing, adrenaline flooding her system, but she refused to show weakness. Good. He adjusted his cuff with meticulous care, the gesture almost meditative. Next time, don't wait for it to escalate. You see aggression, you respond. Break his wrist if you have to. I'll handle the consequences. Then he walked away, leaving her stunned and the remaining businessman pale-faced and subdued. Hannah appeared at her side moments later, shaking her head. See what I mean? He doesn't love. He protects his investments. Don't confuse the two. But Amelia wasn't so sure. There had been something in Seung's eyes in that moment, something raw and barely controlled, that went beyond mere protection of property. The nights blurred together after that, each one a careful dance of elegance and danger. Amelia began to understand the intricate ecosystem of the Eclipse, the regular clients who commanded respect, the newcomers who needed to be watched carefully, the subtle signals that indicated when a situation might turn volatile. She also began to understand the threats that lurked beyond the club's walls. It started with whispers. Conversations she wasn't supposed to overhear but did anyway, her ears trained by years of survival to catch important information. The Liu family is pushing into the docklands. Seung won't let that stand. Heard there was a body found in the river. The Eclipse existed in a delicate balance of power, she realized. Seung Do Hwa controlled this territory, but he wasn't unopposed. There were other families, other organizations, all of them constantly testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses. And then the threats came directly. 2 weeks into her employment, a man walked into the Eclipse during her shift. He was Korean, mid-30s, with a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek and dead eyes that swept the room with professional assessment. He wore an expensive suit, but it couldn't disguise the violence coiled beneath the surface. He sat at the bar and ordered whiskey. Amelia served him, her instincts screaming danger. You're new, he said, his accent thick. Yes, sir. Pretty. Her skin crawled, but she kept her expression neutral. Is there anything else I can get you? He smiled, revealing gold teeth. Tell Seung Do Hwa that Kim Tae-sung sends his regards. Tell him the docklands belong to the Liu family now. Tell him if he wants them back, the price is steep. Before Amelia could respond, the man drained his whiskey, set down a $100 bill, and walked out. She found Hannah immediately and relayed the message. Hannah's face went pale. Stay on the floor. Don't go anywhere alone tonight. 20 minutes later, Seung emerged from his office, and Amelia watched as he had a brief, intense conversation with his head of security. His expression was carved from stone, but she could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the atmosphere had changed. Security doubled. Clients were watched more carefully, and Seung himself spent more time on the floor, his presence a silent warning. When Amelia's shift ended at 2 a.m., Seung was waiting by the employee exit. "I'll have someone drive you home," he said without preamble. "I can take the bus." "You can. But you won't. Not tonight." His eyes met hers, and there was something in them she hadn't seen before, genuine concern, carefully controlled but present nonetheless. Kim Tae-sung doesn't deliver messages without purpose. He wanted to see who heard it. "To see if you'd tell me." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because some people can be bought, threatened, manipulated." He stepped closer, and his voice dropped. "I needed to know which you are." "And?" Amelia asked, lifting her chin defiantly. "And you're still here. Still standing in front of me without fear." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "That's answer enough." A black car pulled up, and Seung opened the door for her himself, a gesture so unexpected that she hesitated. "This is just beginning," he said quietly. "The Liu family is testing me, using my businesses to send messages. That means everyone here becomes a target, including you. Then maybe you should let me go." His jaw tightened. "No." "Why not?" For a long moment, he simply looked at her, and Amelia felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I don't want to." The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Before she could respond, he gestured to the car. "Go. I'll see you tomorrow." Amelia got in, her mind reeling. As the car pulled away, she looked back and saw Seung standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, watching until she disappeared around the corner. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in tension. The Liu family's provocations escalated. A shipment at the docks was intercepted. One of Seung's lower-level operators was hospitalized. Graffiti appeared on a warehouse he owned, territory markers, bold and insulting. Through it all, Seung remained controlled, calculated. But Amelia watched him carefully and saw the stress in the set of his shoulders, the late nights in his office, the quiet conversations with men who looked like they knew 100 ways to kill someone and wouldn't hesitate to use them. She also saw how he managed his empire not through random violence, but through strategy. He met with the Liu family's intermediaries. He reinforced his own alliances. He moved resources carefully, like pieces on a chessboard. And he continued to watch her. One night, after a particularly tense shift where police had shown up asking questions about a noise complaint that everyone knew was harassment, Amelia found herself alone in the back hallway, inventory clipboard in hand. She was checking liquor stock when she heard voices from Seung's office, his door slightly ajar. "They're pushing too hard, too fast. This isn't about the Docklands. It's about testing your resolve." The voice was unfamiliar, older, gravelly. "Then they'll find it unshakable." Seung's voice, cold as winter. "They'll target your businesses. Your people. The girl. The girl is off limits. She's a weakness, Do Hwa. They know it. I know it. You need to." "I said she's off limits." The steel in his voice was absolute. "Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. Make sure that message is delivered clearly." Silence. Amelia backed away from the door, her heart pounding. She was a weakness. A liability. But he'd claimed her anyway, drawn a line around her in blood and dared anyone to cross it. The question was why. She got her partial answer 2 nights later when Seung summoned her to his office after her shift. The room was all dark wood and leather, bookshelves lined with volumes in Korean and English, a massive desk that looked like it cost more than her family's yearly rent. He stood by the window overlooking the city, hands in his pockets, the lights of downtown painting him in shades of blue and gold. "You've been here 3 weeks, he said without turning around. "Yes. You've learned quickly. Hannah says you're one of the best she's trained." Amelia didn't respond. Compliments from men like him usually came with strings attached. He turned, finally, and his eyes found hers across the dim room. The Liu family is escalating. There's going to be conflict. Real conflict. Blood. I know. You could still leave. I'd release you from our arrangement. No debt reinstated, no consequences. I'd even make sure your family stays protected. It was the second time he'd offered her an out. The second time he'd given her a choice when he could have simply commanded. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you keep giving me options? Seung walked closer, each step measured, until he stood directly in front of her. Close enough that she could see the faint scar above his eyebrow, the exact shade of dark brown in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when he was controlling emotion. Because you're not a possession. I paid your debt, yes. But that doesn't make you mine. It makes us connected. And I've learned that things bound by force break. Things bound by choice endure. That's a pretty philosophy for a crime lord. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile. I'm a businessman, Miss Jonas. Crime is simply business by other means. And what am I? Another business transaction? He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. You're a variable I didn't account for. You were supposed to be an investment. A test. A way to see if courage could be cultivated or if it was inherent. But you've become. What? His hand came up slowly, as if giving her time to move away, and his fingers brushed the bruise on her wrist, the mark from the businessman he'd thrown out. His touch was surprisingly gentle. A complication, he finished quietly. The air between them felt electric, charged with something dangerous and intoxicating. Amelia's breath caught, her pulse racing, and she realized with startling clarity that she wasn't afraid of him. Not even now, alone in his office with the door closed and the city spread out beneath them like a kingdom. She was afraid of how much she wanted to close the distance between them. I'm staying, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Not because you own me. Because I choose to. Something shifted in his expression, relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. Then we understand each other. Do we? He stepped back, putting space between them, and the careful control slid back into place. The Liu family will make a move soon. When they do, I need you to be smart. Follow Hannah's instructions. Stay in public areas. Don't play hero. I'm not a hero. No, he agreed, his eyes holding hers. You're a survivor. That's more dangerous. He walked back to his desk, effectively dismissing her, but as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Amelia. She turned. Thank you. For staying. She nodded and left, her mind whirling. As she collected her things and headed home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed a threshold she couldn't uncross. That whatever was building between her and Seung Do Hwa was a fire that would either forge them or consume them entirely. And she wasn't sure which she wanted more. The attack came on a Friday night when the eclipse was at its fullest, every booth occupied, every table claimed, the air thick with expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and the low hum of power brokers conducting their shadowy business. Amelia moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her new black dress, tailored, elegant, paid for by Seung, fitting like a second skin. She'd learned to navigate this world, to read its currents and eddies, to sense danger before it fully materialized. Tonight, the danger was a storm on the horizon, and everyone could feel it. Seung had been in back-to-back meetings all evening, his jaw tight, his movements more controlled than usual, which meant he was preparing for something. Hannah had doubled the floor staff and tripled security. Men in dark suits positioned themselves at every entrance, every exit, their eyes constantly scanning. The Liu family was going to make their move. It was just a question of when. Amelia was serving drinks to a table of Japanese businessmen when she felt it, a shift in the atmosphere, like the pressure drop before lightning strikes. Conversations didn't stop, but they changed tenor. Bodies tensed. The security guard's hands moved closer to concealed weapons. 3 men entered through the main entrance. Korean, well-dressed, moving with the casual confidence of people who knew they were starting a war and didn't care. She recognized the one in front immediately, Kim Tae-sung, the scarred man who delivered the message weeks ago. Behind them, More men filtered in through other entrances. Not an army, but enough. 6, 8, 10. All of them positioning themselves strategically throughout the room, cutting off exits, creating zones of control. Hannah appeared at Amelia's side, her voice urgent and low. Back rooms. Now. Move. What about the clients? They knew what they were walking into when they came here. Move. But before Amelia could take a step, Kim Tae-sung's voice cut through the jazz music, loud and sharp. Everyone stays exactly where they are. The music died. The room went silent save for the clink of ice in glasses, the nervous clearing of throats. Kim smiled, his gold teeth catching the light. We're not here for you. We're here for Seung Do Hwa. A simple business discussion. Nobody needs to get hurt. From the upstairs balcony, Sung's voice rang out, calm, controlled, deadly. Then you should have called for an appointment, Tae-sung. Walking into my establishment with armed men isn't a discussion. It's a provocation. He descended the staircase slowly, deliberately, flanked by his own security. Amelia's breath caught as she watched him, every inch the predator now, the careful businessman facade stripped away to reveal the violence beneath. He wore a black suit tonight, stark and severe, and his eyes were cold enough to freeze blood. Your establishment. Kim laughed, spreading his arms wide. The Liu family owns the docks now. Your shipments are ours. Your protection payments are ours. This district belongs to us. You're a relic, Do Hwa. Your father's empire died with him. It's time you accept that. Sung reached the bottom of the stairs, his hands relaxed at his sides, but Amelia could see the coiled tension in his shoulders. My father built this empire on respect and calculated force. You're offering neither. Just childish posturing. Then let me be clear. Kim pulled a gun from his jacket, sleek, black, terrifyingly casual, and the entire room seemed to inhale sharply. The docks are ours. This club is ours. And if you want to keep breathing, you'll sign the territory over tonight. Sung's expression didn't change. No. No. Kim's smile widened. You're that ready to die. I'm that ready to watch you try. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Kim's men drew weapons. Sung's security responded instantly. In seconds, the elegant club had transformed into a Mexican standoff, guns pointed in every direction, clients diving under tables, the careful veneer of civilization shattered. Amelia's training kicked in. She dropped behind the bar, pulling 2 other servers with her. Hannah was already there, phone in hand, presumably calling for reinforcements. But Amelia couldn't tear her eyes away from Sung, standing in the open, exposed, facing down 10 armed men with nothing but cold fury and absolute conviction. He was going to get himself killed. And he didn't seem to care. Last chance, Do Hwa, Kim said, his gun now pointed directly at Sung's chest. Sign, or everyone here dies with you. Starting with his eyes swept the room and landed on Amelia, still partially visible behind the bar. His smile turned cruel. Ha! Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Kim gestured, and one of his men moved toward the bar. Amelia stood before she could think better of it, instinct overriding common sense. She wouldn't cower. Wouldn't hide while others fought battles around her. The man grabbed her arm, yanking her forward, and pressed a gun to her temple. The cold metal against her skin was shocking, grounding, terrifying. Amelia, don't, Sung's voice, for the first time since she'd met him, cracked with something raw. Fear. Rage. Both. She's pretty, Kim observed, walking closer. The one you've been protecting. The weakness my sources told me about. I didn't believe it at first, Seung Do Hwa, emotionally compromised. But look at your face. They were right. The gun pressed harder against Amelia's head, and she forced herself to breathe, to think. She could feel the man's heart racing through his grip on her arm. He was nervous. Inexperienced. That was something. Sung's hands had curled into fists, his control fracturing at the edges. Let her go. This is between us. Everything is between us now, Kim said. Sign the papers, and she lives. Refuse, and I paint these nice walls with her blood. Amelia met Sung's eyes across the room, and in that moment, she understood. If he signed, he'd lose everything: his territory, his power, his reputation. The vultures would circle. Other families would attack. Everything he'd built would crumble. And he was going to do it anyway. For her. She couldn't let that happen. "Do you know what I learned working here?" Amelia said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension. Kim turned to her, surprised. "What?" "That men like you, men who need guns and numbers to feel powerful, you're all the same. You talk about respect and territory, but you don't understand either. Because real power?" She looked at Seung, then back at Kim. "Real power doesn't need to announce itself." "Shut up," the man holding her hissed. But Amelia kept talking, her mind racing, remembering everything Hannah had taught her about reading people, about finding weaknesses. "You're not here for territory. You're here because the Liu family is testing you. They sent you to prove yourself, didn't they? To see if you're worthy of advancement. And if you fail." I said shut up. The gun trembled against her temple. "If you fail, they'll kill you themselves." Kim's face darkened. "You don't know anything. I know you're scared. I can see it. You're trying too hard, pushing too fast. The Liu family doesn't respect that. They respect patience. Strategy." She paused, letting the words sink in. Seung Do Hwa has held this territory for 8 years. Through wars, through challenges, through attempts by better men than you. What makes you think tonight will be different? For a moment, doubt flickered across Kim's face. Just a moment. But a moment was enough. Seung moved. Not toward Kim. Toward the man holding Amelia. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, impossibly fast, impossibly precise, and his hand locked around the gunman's wrist, twisting with brutal efficiency. The gun clattered to the floor. Seung's other hand drove into the man's throat, and he crumpled. Amelia stumbled back, her heart hammering, as chaos erupted. Seung's security moved as one, years of training and loyalty manifesting in synchronized violence. Kim's men were good, but Seung's were better, more disciplined, more motivated, protecting something rather than just following orders. Gunshots cracked through the air. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Seung grabbed Amelia, pulling her behind him, his body a shield. "Stay down." "I'm not." "Stay down." The command in his voice left no room for argument. She dropped into a crouch, watching as Seung moved through the chaos with terrifying grace. He disarmed one of Kim's men, used the stolen gun to shoot another in the shoulder, then drove his elbow into a third man's face with bone-breaking force. This was Seung Do Hwa unmasked, not the calculated businessman, not the controlled crime lord, but the predator his reputation was built on. Efficient. Brutal. Unstoppable. Kim tried to run, but Seung's head of security, a massive man named Jin Ho, caught him at the door, driving him to his knees. In less than 3 minutes, it was over. Kim's men were disarmed, subdued, or bleeding on the marble floor. The clients who dived for cover were emerging cautiously. And Seung stood in the center of it all, his suit torn, his knuckles bloody, breathing hard but otherwise unmarked. He walked to where Jin Ho held Kim and crouched down to meet his eyes. "You came into my home," Seung said quietly, his voice colder than anything Amelia had ever heard. "You threatened my people. You put a gun to her head. Each word was a death sentence. The Liu family will hear about this. About your failure. Your rashness. Your complete lack of strategy or respect." Kim's face had gone pale, the reality of his situation sinking in. "But I'm going to let you live," Seung continued. "Because you're more useful alive, a message to the Liu family about what happens when they test me. You'll go back to them broken, humiliated, and they'll know, this territory is mine. It will always be mine. And anyone who challenges that will face the same fate." He stood, nodding to Jin Ho, who hauled Kim to his feet and dragged him toward the exit. Then Seung turned, his eyes finding Amelia where she still crouched behind an overturned table. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, pulling her to her feet, his hands framing her face as his eyes searched hers frantically. "Are you hurt?" Words seemed to fail him. "I'm fine," she breathed, her hands coming up to grip his wrists. "I'm okay. You could have been killed. He had a gun to your head, And you, his jaw clenched. What were you thinking? I was thinking you were about to throw away everything you'd built. For me. Her voice steadied. I couldn't let that happen. You think I care about territory more than, he stopped, seeming to struggle with something. Then, quieter, you could have died, Amelia. So could you. You walked right into their guns. That's different. Why? Because you're used to it. Because your life matters less. She stepped closer, anger and adrenaline and something fiercer burning through her. You told me I wasn't a possession. That I had choices. Well, I chose to stand up. I chose to fight. Just like you've been doing your whole life. His hands slid from her face to her shoulders, gripping tight. You terrify me. The admission was raw, unguarded, and it stopped her cold. I've faced wars, he continued, his voice low and urgent. Rivals. Betrayals. I've been shot, stabbed, left for dead. And I've never been afraid. But watching that gun against your head, his grip tightened. I would have burned this entire city to ash to keep you safe. Seung. I don't know what this is between us, he said, the words tumbling out like a confession. I've spent weeks trying to categorize it, control it, understand it. But I can't. All I know is that you've become something I can't afford to lose. And I don't lose, Amelia. I don't bend. But for you. She kissed him. Stood on her toes, threaded her fingers through his hair, and pulled him down to meet her lips. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was fire and desperation and the relief of survival, of choosing each other in a moment when everything else had fallen away. Seung responded instantly, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her against him as if he could make her part of him through sheer will. The kiss deepened, urgent and claiming, and Amelia felt something in her chest crack open, all the tension of the past weeks, the fear and attraction and defiance and understanding, pouring through the breach. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. I choose this, she whispered. I choose you. Not because you paid my debt. Not because I'm afraid or obligated. Because you see me. Really see me. And you've never once asked me to be less than I am. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You could have anyone. A normal life. Safety. I don't want normal. I want real. She met his eyes. Is this real? Yes. No hesitation. God help us both, but yes. Around them, the club was being cleaned. Security was removing the last of Kim's men. Hannah was organizing the shaken staff. The world continued, but for a moment, Seung and Amelia existed in a bubble of stillness. The Liu family will retaliate eventually, he said quietly. I know. My life is dangerous. Unpredictable. Dark. I know that too. And you're still choosing it. She pulled back just enough to look at him fully, this complicated, violent, controlled man who'd shown her more respect and genuine partnership than anyone in her life. I grew up in darkness, Seung. Poverty, desperation, watching my mother slowly die while I served drinks to men who saw me as disposable. You gave me a different kind of darkness, one with power, with choice, with the ability to fight back. I'm not afraid of your world. You should be. Maybe. But I'm more afraid of a life where I never know what this could become. Something shifted in his expression, a wall coming down, control giving way to something genuine and vulnerable. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. When they separated, he took her hand. Come with me. He led her upstairs to his private office, the one place in the club that was truly his. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and he stood there with her, arms wrapped around her from behind, both of them staring at the glittering lights. I'm not an easy man to love, he said quietly. Good thing I'm not an easy woman to know. His chest rumbled with a quiet laugh. My father used to say that power and love couldn't coexist. That the moment you let someone in, you gave them the knife to kill you. Do you believe that? He was quiet for a long moment. I did. Before you walked into my life and hit me with a tray. She smiled despite herself. That seems like a lifetime ago. It was. We've both changed. For better or worse. He turned her in his arms, his expression serious. I don't know yet. But I know I'm willing to find out. With you. It wasn't a declaration of love. Wasn't a promise of happily ever after. Men like Seung Do Hwa didn't make those promises because their world didn't allow for them. But it was truth, raw and honest and enough. Then we find out together, Amelia said. He kissed her forehead, and they stood there as the city sprawled beneath them, a kingdom of light and shadow, of power and danger, of possibilities both beautiful and terrifying. The eclipse would reopen tomorrow. The Liu family would plot their next move. Life would continue in all its complicated, dangerous glory. But tonight, in this moment, Amelia Jonas and Seung Do Hwa had chosen each other. Not out of obligation or strategy or desperation, but out of recognition, two people who refused to break, who'd found something worth fighting for in each other. And in a world built on violence and calculated moves, that choice was the most dangerous thing either of them had ever done. It was also the most real. 3 months later, Amelia stood on the balcony of Seung's penthouse apartment, her apartment now too, though she still kept her family's place and visited them weekly. Her mother was thriving with proper medical care. Daniel had been accepted into a prestigious university program. The debt was truly gone, replaced by security she'd never imagined possible. Below, the city pulsed with life. The eclipse had become more than just Seung's club, it had become theirs, a partnership where she managed operations with Hannah while he handled the darker aspects of his empire. The Liu family had backed off after Kim's humiliation, choosing to consolidate rather than continue a war they couldn't win. She felt Seung's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Thinking, he murmured. Always. About how 6 months ago, I was drowning. And now you're swimming, he finished. She turned in his arms, meeting those dark eyes that had once terrified her and now made her feel seen. Understood. Chosen. No, she corrected, smiling. Now we're swimming. Together. His lips curved, a real smile, rare and genuine. Together. And as the city lights sparkled around them like captured stars, Amelia Jonas knew with absolute certainty that she'd never regret the moment she'd hit Seung Do Hwa with that tray. It had been the beginning of everything. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more thrilling stories.